Hello, humans who are trying to learn to code for some reason. I don't know why. Here we are. This is Code with Connor Unit 3, topic number 2. We're going to start off by looking at the challenge from the last lesson. Let's go. All right, I left you with two functions to write, the setup turtle and the draw square. Now yours might be different than mine because I kind of just moved my turtle to a specific location. You might have moved yours somewhere else. I set my pen width to a specific value. Yours might be different, and so on. So I showed you the basics. We import, we set up the window, we set up our turtle. I called mine Timmy. Hi, Timmy. In my setup turtle, I lifted the pen, moved him backward, moved him all over the place until he was in a position I was happy. Then I stuck the pen down again, set his pen size to 10. Pretty good pen size, Timmy. And then I set his color to blue. Again, this is going to look so different depending on what you were trying to accomplish. I just tried to pull him down and to the left a little bit, made sure he was pointing to the right or pointing east, and then I set his color to blue, gave him a nice wide pen size. Draw square, we've seen this code before. For I in range 4, Timmy forward 400, Timmy left 90. Right, so I just created this little draw square 4. I just created this little draw square method where we do 4 moves. And that was it. That was all I added. Then I just called the two functions, set up and draw. And that was it. So that was a challenge from Unit 3, Topic 1. Now we're going to jump in. We're going to look at today's lesson, which is functions that take a parameter but do not return values. We're not there yet. All right. We're actually going to start our code with the challenge code from the last lesson. Crazy. So here's the code from the last lesson. I'm going to ditch setup turtle for right now. We're going to come back to that later. I want to start with the draw square. So one thing that I think would be interesting would be, instead of only allowing us to draw a square of size 400, what if we wrote a function that was dynamic? It could draw a square of any size. So what we're going to do here is, in these brackets, in these parentheses, we can put a variable name. Now this doesn't have to be a variable that I've already defined. So size is not defined anywhere else in my code, but that's fine. That variable is going to get defined when the function gets called. It's what we call a local variable. And it's only going to exist inside the block, okay, inside the function block. And then as soon as the function runs, it's gone. It disappears. So what I'm going to do is, when they go to draw square, when they call my function draw square, they're going to have to give me the size that they want the square to be. And then for I in range 4, instead of moving forward 400, I'm going to move forward by size. So what I'm doing is I'm telling the user, or not necessarily the user, but the programmer, you want to call my function? Cool. You have to give me a size variable. And this brings in what's called a precondition. A precondition is something that you're telling the coder or the user that in order to do this, you need to give me the right thing. Okay? Takes an integer value that must be greater than 0. This takes an integer value that must be greater than 0. So in other words, in order to use this function, you have to give me an integer that's greater than 0. If you give me anything other than that, things are going to get messy, or it's going to break the code. Make sure you do this. So as a coder, when you're working on a project, for example, and there's a large code base and your buddy writes a function and you need to write something that uses your buddy's function, you're going to go look at the precondition for that function so that you make sure that your code calls on their function correctly. How does this affect when I call it? When I call draw square now, this is where I'm going to put the number. So if I put 100 there, what happens in execution is it still doesn't execute this, just stores the function, gets here, and takes that 100 and sends it up and makes size equal to 100 temporarily, runs the block of code, and then ends, and then size is gone again. Okay, let's run that and see it. We see there's our little 100 square. Perfect. So that's how we can pass a parameter to a function. So let's beef up our program a little bit here that we had started with. We'll leave this draw square exactly like it is. So I'll just hide it for now. You know, I'll leave it there in case you're pausing the video and you want to see it. So we're going to modify our setup turtle just to be a little bit cleaner. Why don't we do a set position instead of all this nonsense? So we'll do a Timmy.setPosition. And why don't we ask the user when they set up the turtle to give us an X and a Y value, and then we're going to set the position to those X and Y values so that the user, when they call our setup turtle, they get to tell us where they want it to start. Okay. Now notice the comma. This means I'm taking 2 parameters. So here again, precondition is going to be takes 2 integers representing starting coordinates of turtle. So we're going to use the set position on our turtle to stick it where we want it. I've got my pen size and I've got my color. So now when my user calls setup turtle, we could decide to stick it kind of maybe down to the left, negative 200, negative 200. So when I'm calling this, I'm giving x the value of negative 200 and y the value of negative 200. And then I'm going to draw the square of the given size, right? And we could even maybe extend this a tiny bit. So what if we did xval equals int input starting x, and then we do that again for y, starting y, and then we'll do side length equals int input side length. So what I'm doing here, add my brackets, what I'm doing is I'm asking the user for these three values. So now when I call my functions, instead of sending it negative 200, I'm going to send it the user given x val. And then I'm going to send it y val. And when I go to draw my square, I'm going to draw it side length. So I'm getting variables from the user that I'm then passing as parameters to my functions, which are then being used to run. Execution chain. Always be thinking about the execution chain. Okay, when a line of code runs, you should know what line of code ran before it. Right? We should always be able to trace that jumping around in a program. Jumping back for a second to the setup turtle function, when I deleted some of that code from the challenge, I forgot to put the pen down. So after set position, make sure you do a timmy.pen down so that it's going to behave the way we want it to. Now let's save it and run it and see how it looks. So our starting x value, let's do negative 300. Starting y, let's do negative 100. And side length, let's do something big like 500. So we should see it shoot down and to the left and then drop. There we go. So it works exactly as intended, even though now we're obviously dealing with it differently in terms of how we're handling user input, and now we're passing that user input into functions. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of passing parameters into functions. And it's important that we recognize that these variables are local. They only exist during the execution of that block of code, and then as soon as it ends, they stop existing. Now you can use variable names here that you use outside of all functions in your code, but it's not recommended. What is totally fine is to use the same variable names for parameters of multiple functions. That's very commonplace. And that's totally fine because no two functions can ever be kind of running at the exact same time. You're either in one or you're in the other, right? And so from that regard, it doesn't really matter that those variables are existing by the same names in different functions. They're still local within their code block. It's not recommended that you use a variable name in a function that you're using outside of all functions in your main code. That's not recommended, and we'll talk about why later in this unit when we talk about global variables. All right, it's time to talk challenge. Now this one is a big one, and it's going to take a little bit of work for you to pull it off. So I want to show you how it runs. Now it's similar to what we left off with in the main lesson, but it's going to add some complexity to it. So you'll see that I'm pulling on the unit project from the last unit in this user menu. So I've got a user menu where they've got the choice of draw square, draw triangle, draw a regular polygon. That's a tough one. Clear screen, move turtle, and quit program. All right. So the user's prompted. So if I choose draw square, it asks me for the side length of the square, 300. And it's going to draw my square. And then it brings me back to my user menu. So I can clear the screen. I can see where my turtle is currently located. I'm going to move my turtle. I'm going to move my turtle left 300 and down 300 to a new position. Now I'm going to draw a square of size 600. I draw a real big square. So I cleared the screen by accident. That's fine. Now I'm going to draw a regular polygon. So that's C. It asks me how many sides. I'm going to do an 8-sided polygon. And the side length for each one, 200. And it's going to draw me an 8-sided regular polygon. Cool. I like that a lot. And then I can clear it. Never drew a triangle yet. Let's do that. Draw a triangle with side length 50. Tiny little triangle. And then Q quits the program. So that's the challenge, and that's how it's going to work. Now, there's a lot going on in the code to make this work. I'm not going to give away too much, but here's what I will show you. Okay, import the turtle, set up the screen, set up the whatever, set up the pen size, cool. I created a string called menu, just like I did before. Nice little menu with the 3 quotes. My code's pretty straightforward. I have this draw polygon. It takes number of sides in X. This is a very hard function to write. You're going to have to get mathy in order to figure out how to do it properly. Draw triangle we've seen, draw square we've seen, and then I have this user menu that's actually going to do the while true loop to do the prompting of the user value. And you'll see the only actual code after my functions are defined is one call to user menu. And then user menu loops until they hit quit. And when it's done, it ends the function, which then ends the file and stops running the program. So that's what we're looking for the challenge here for Unit 3 Topic 2. You're going to be pushing yourself a little bit, especially if you're going to do the draw regular polygon. But the nice thing about us doing something a little bit harder now is we can go through this code in the next video and maybe help you understand it a bit. Whereas the projects, I'm not going through with you and showing you how that code works, so you're left on your own. So this one we're definitely going to go through because it's important we understand that structure, because now we're starting to build programs that actually have a little bit of functionality to them. Again, you're great humans. I assume you're here watching this. You must be, right? I think that's how that works. Either way, thanks for being here. Like, share, subscribe. It's awesome. And we'll see you back here in the next video. Bye, humans.